You know, I had a thought just now. Um, it's kind of here's a fun thought, or maybe like I don't know what you would call it. It's a fun thought. We think of video games, right? When we play a video game, we operate within a system, and that system creates the appeal of fairness, right? Everyone plays by the same rules, and then like this is barring cheaters and stuff. Those are not the rule, is the exception, right? But inherently, if you step back, and now people, the vast majority of gamers aren't like singular gamers, outside of the competitive process. Like, say we're all OSU players. If you confine yourself within the system, sure, you could be very rational and say everything's fair game. You will even playing ground and the rule sets and stuff. But the irony in this is that if you step back, like myself, and like a lot of people who play many games now, and they're more globally considered gamers as opposed to an OSU player or something like that, something very finite or specific. Video games are ironically some of the most unfair things to participate in. Like, you might be thinking, what are you talking about? Getting jobs is pretty unfair. It's like, yeah, but in a job, there's safeguards, negligence, accountability, responsibility, effort in, effort out, normalization of value. In video games, there's none of that. And what makes it even less than that is that we use the euphemism that it's a game. So if it's unfair, that's okay. You might be thinking, oh no, but lots of people get upset when it's fair and stuff like, but not as much as outside of video games. Like, when you go to a job and you get underpaid and it gets outed, there's accountability and negligence. If you're neglected in a job, there's accountability. In a game, the winner is the winner. Even if they come in with like genius and talent and stuff, it's still fair. You still consider it as fair. But really, in reality, pragmatically speaking, it's unfair. But that's the whole point. Like, the person that has the edge came in with an advantage or developed an advantage. So it's kind of weird and not weird depending on what your perspective is. But games reinforce that unfairness and this, like, inequity is fine because it's a game. So, like, for example, you just love this game so much, and suddenly someone just comes around, clobbers it, take a poop on it, and then leave and say, yeah, the game's boring, it's not challenging, and it walks away. It's unfair. Can you do anything about it? No, it's just a game. It's like, do you want to care too much about it? Well, you got to reason that it's just a game. But now these games are turning into lifestyles, right? Gaming has turned into lifestyles. And I almost want to say, sorry, this is another digression, but I want to say that games are even crueler than reality. Even in the United States, there is still, I would debatably say, more consistent accountability and equity outside of video game space. So now let's think about it. Which one's more crueler? When you get a job, you work for a long enough time, you climb up the ladder, like opportunities, people are always competitive to each other to hire to fill their accountability and responsibility. In games, there's no accountability or responsibility. You buy the game, you suck at it, it's your fault. So man, I gotta write this. I gotta develop this idea a little bit. Man, so now we have kids growing up, and the vast majority of their self-esteem is comes from participating in gaming, if the vast majority of their self-esteem comes from gaming, I don't blame them for developing self-esteem issues. Because the first thing about games is someone's going to turn it into a competition. Even if you're a competition with yourself can be fruitful and healthy, which I encourage, but even that can go sour based on the system that's developed. So you are hinging on being reinforced and being reminded if you either suck at everything you do or you're kind of good but not good enough. Usually that's most of the game designs. Like the vast majority of game designs challenges you, right? So you get the only reward by overcoming challenges. In the real world, that's not the answer. There are many ways to feel rewarded and feel satisfied and be told you've done a great job. You didn't work hard and it's easy, but you've done a great job. In a game, there's a whole generation of gamers that simply can't even feel rewarded for completing a game anymore. It has to be challenging. The moment you exit out of this micro environment and go into like a communicative demand of working for an employer and stuff, your whole lifestyle and mindset has to change completely. Like it's not necessarily doing the best you can, it's doing what's appropriate. And it's not about what you think is appropriate and what you're doing the best. It's about the best for the appropriate task and who you're working for, or otherwise you have to be your own boss. And the reality of being your own boss is you're playing it like a video game. You are your worst enemy. So if you're already having problems building self-esteem from games like this game is literally telling me I suck so much that I can't get a 3-star on an easy map, quote unquote easy map, level 7. And that's the self-esteem you're going to have going into developing your own business. That's not going to cut it. That's going to be so non-sustainable. You're going to live a whole life with self-esteem issues. So I'm starting to think like touching grass, it sounds like an old hat thing, but man, disconnecting, yeah. Sometimes it might just be healthy about that. And if it's not gaming, it's social media. It does the same. It gamifies your life. More followers, this person has less followers, you have more followers. Clearly you're doing something more. It gamifies it. It measures it. But outside the scape, you have other metrics. There are people who pat you on the back, like say like, I care about you. I think you're working too hard. Games don't tell you you're working too hard. Social media doesn't tell you you're working too hard or you're trying too hard. Sit back, relax, recover, meditate, breathe, appreciate the sun, fireball in the sky that is flashbanging you when you step out the door. Just a little callback to the beginning. But none of that, there's none of that. You are always constantly reminded and you are reinforced to see it. So when you, not 727, but when you're playing a game, what are you going to do? You're going to look for guides to do it better. If you're struggling, you're going to constantly look for improvement. And you are only ever seeking and told that there are people better than you because you're always looking up in a game. You don't look down in a game. You don't backtrack and play something. That's not the mentality anymore. If you're my age, I replay games. Like I retread places to find new meaning in things. But that's a carryover from people born into a lifestyle that is constantly reinforcing you that you need to improve, but improve in a measurable way, in a defined system. I can earnestly say that games, if you hate schoolwork, I find it easier to be going to school and performing well than performing well in a myriad of competitive games. Unfortunately, that's just the landscape right now. Like, it's weird. Like, I actually think I might have to concede and take back my words of like a bit of perspective that I've been pushing, where games, certainly you choose the game because it's very favorable to you. You like the game. It lowers that barrier of effort or challenge where you can choose your challenges. But the thing is, you're choosing a challenge you like and probably want to be good at. So it already selectively tells you that, hey, if you fail here, can it be any better doing something you don't like? This generation would say no. Prior generation would say, you don't know until you try. The thing that I got great at, the thing I burned 5 suns for, I didn't know I was good at. Or I didn't even know I liked it when I was younger. So, and if you ask people how I would even challenge it, not necessarily past a certain age, of course. Like some of the successful people, what were their success? It was exploration. It was diversity. They end up having a combination of things that they didn't go out to seek. But now we have games. Games are so defined. So now I'm starting to think, what if social media can be responsible for negligence or be held accountable in some way, shape, or form of conditioning or grooming young adults? How much are game developers responsible for? Like, as a medium, as gaming continues to rise as a dominant medium, along with like streaming and stuff, all the other forms of medium are under scrutiny for, disclaimers, ratings, like stuff. But games aren't anymore. Not really. And you might be thinking, nah, games are nice and stuff. It's like, if you're a Steam user, you know exactly where I'm going with this. Because games are fair game. It's like, all pun intended, there are some stuff that will warp impressionable adults like reality, and with enough stimuli it can be very defining. So anyways, that's another digression, but Sundays are digression days. I obviously have lots of observations, but I have no like solution or balance or compromise. It's just it's crazy. Like if work. So here's like the hot take, right? If I wanted to be a professional gamer, knowing the obstacles and knowing the mentality and the lifestyle, I would still have become a scientist in the end. A scientist is even more competitive than most jobs, and I still would agree that it is that. And this is coming from a different angle, because the other angle is, well, statistically, yes, it's far rarer to be like a content creator who plays video games for a living, etc., etc. If you take the statistics, break away from your emotions and compare to statistics, that's usually the angle most people use. But now I'm talking about the bigger picture, like another bigger picture, the next level. Mindset, personality, and reality changing kind of thing. Like your self-esteem, your work-life balance, all that works against it too. I can't possibly think there is, mind you, I'm talking about the games that people are playing, like the ones that have the biggest influence. I play different games. I play games that legitimately rewards you for sitting there for 30 minutes contemplating about the significance of the thing you're staring at in your screen. That's not a big stretch from going to an art gallery, sitting down and trying to interpret someone's piece that's in front of you. It's a different take. It's a different reward system. It's not just performance. I have yet to enter a conversation with someone at the start that doesn't deal with performance. Like, it's some form of performance that gathers people together. It's not a wishing of well-being or an expression of self or a connection through expression. It's legitimately dictated by the performance or getting better at something. These are the conversations that hold people now. I want to do like a quick hot take. Quick like nice praise to anyone who's listening. Be happy that you're you. That's all I'm saying. Like, sit down, look at what you have done, what you have chosen to do. Just give yourself a pat on the back every once in a pat on the shoulder every once in a while. Like, you live in a time where you're literally always being measured. It's so hard to break away from just saying, I'm just not good enough. Oh, constantly. So being constantly connected with the whole pool of human beings is exhausting. When you go out in a job, you're connected within a limited scape. So that limited scape still is a good compromise from being too big of a sample size to too small of a sample size. There's compromises for being a big there are pros and cons to being a big fish in a small pond and a small fish in a gigantic ocean. And kids don't go back and forth anymore. They're legitimately, when they're born, competent enough to go on the internet, they're in the ocean. Not even Nemo can survive that, okay? Like, Nemo didn't even get a chance to learn how to swim yet, and you're already in the ocean. Of course, the sharks are gonna gobble you up right away. So, sit back, smile, think about all the things you can do, not all the things you can't do. Reverse that mindset every once in a while. Sit down, ask yourself, what can you do well? Or well enough, you know? Sorry, that's it. What triggers me is the developer's approach to stringent scoring, and all I can see is if there's a kid with low self-esteem who thinks this is a cute game and suddenly plays this, it's gonna slam their self-esteem down a couple notches when it's probably already pretty glass thin already. I just see, I can't, I'm indifferent, but I can only imagine how frustrating it can be if you're playing a game and just keep doing the same thing, right? You're thinking to yourself, oh, but I practice so much, and so I'm out of ideas to improve. It's like, well, technically, grinding passive practice, which is what a younger adult, an inexperienced person would do, is not sufficient. The large, incredible amount of body of scientific evidence would suggest that it's a very inefficient way to practice. It's an inefficient way to improve. But you learn, a lot of the people that learn that come from diversified experiences. But if 90% of what you want to do is play video games don't tell you that. They're not responsible. Developers and publishers are not responsible on focusing on, oh, how do we blunt the learning curve? How do we make the tutorial? As long as it doesn't affect their bottom line, which are their sales, tutorials are almost absolutely optional. It's to the point where if you are ahead of the game, you know, those people who sit down and say, I'm really good at video games. If you can say that to yourself sitting down before you start a video game, you are in the minority, because that type of mindset is like good for you, and I hope you continue to feel that way. But generally speaking, you pick up something you're unfamiliar with, you're gonna perform really terribly. And games don't just sit there and say, I'm really good at video games. Games don't tell you like, that's okay, go to bed, sleep it off, try again next time. Like, you know, go outside, have a drink, hang out with friends, come back and you'll do better. Like, there's no, games do not offer sympathy. They're not designed in a manner that gives you. Social media is even closer, but even social media is unrelentingly polar opposite. You have to be better and stuff. So even social media with actual strangers can't even promote, you know. And then you have the platforms, the streaming content, like the not that type of streaming content, the streaming content like Netflix, Disney Plus. What they have to put out is under ridicule too. You have to make sure that audience know and be aware, because it's selectively conditioning you to think a certain way. But games, not yet. It's off the mark. There was a time when video games were under attack, like for like violence and stuff, which is unfounded, by the way, debunked about the corollary behaviors between that. But I'm not sure about self-esteem. That's still, it's a different context now. Because gaming before had a smaller footprint on a person's life. So I'm not saying spin the tinfoil hat and let those people say like, oh, I told you so, violence make violent kids. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that our lifestyle has changed and the gaming scape has changed. So what games emphasize and what feelings they continue to condition has changed. And the people who play the game's mentality has changed because of it. Now you go and you see a person who randomly drops into a stream that you're garbage at this game. And maybe earlier on it was like, that's no big deal, you know, it's video games I do for fun. It's like 15% of my life. But now if you go and drop in on someone's like, you're garbage at this game, it's like, well, this person plays like 80% of their life is dedicated to this game. Now we are talking about a different story. And it's becoming more and more prevalent because the footprint of games is rivaling that of all the other mediums like news and stuff. And those people, those mediums are actually moderated. They have to try to balance and safeguard younger adults that may be selectively attentive to things. So now I just think about the ones that are just about to turn teenagers, by the way. Gen Alpha, I think, is around 12 or 13, like now. So the Zoomer, like after post-Zoomer generation, are just about to turn, to be technically legally, they've probably been doing all most of the time, but legally be on these types of outlets where it features video games. And I'm gonna tell you, school is way less brutal than a video game. When you screw up and suck at a video game, you can self-help yourself all you want, but if you can't live outside yourself, which you won't because you're a little kid, right? And you don't really connect with people yet. You weren't forced into situations and stuff. School at least tries to do that. There are other people. There are people concerned for you. It's their job to concern for you. when you spend your life around video games growing up, no one's there to say like, it's all right, you can play a different game. You'll find the game that you're more comfortable and happy with. It's not that anymore. There's no one there helping you soften the blow. So you just go through life, and by the time you turn 18, it's like, I don't want to leave. I hate everyone. Like, kids grow up, it's like, I hate everyone. They're all my competition. Like, people, like kids that play COD and CSGO growing up, or Fortnite, when they exit, they're like, you're my competition. Like, I hate all of you. Like, they don't even develop empathy anymore. It's just, I hate everyone more than I hate myself, so therefore I'm going to keep hating everyone. It's crazy, because the game treats every other person as competition. It's not like everyone's going to hug it up or something. The popular games. I'm talking about the games that take up people's lifestyles, like 80% of their lifestyles. When I'm streaming, it doesn't actually still, even streaming like 4 to 5 hours a day, it still doesn't take up most of my lifestyle. I still do 50 to 60% other things. So games, although they take up a lot of my free time is still, even unemployed, it's like, it doesn't define me. But there are people that are defined by video games, and I do think that at some point, maybe 2 or 3 years in the future, there's a whole other digression about if the internet's real. We might talk about this later in the day. If the internet is real post 2016, that's a really big topic that people are talking about right now, and it's become really real because of like GPT and the fruition and maturation of artificial intelligence. But that's besides the point. Kids, man, I want to give kids a popsicle or something, or like something. You just gotta hug yourself a little bit. That sounded weird, but you gotta sit back and just smile for what you have accomplished so far. Like, I know games aren't gonna really help you with that. Like, you beat a game, what is it gonna do? It's gonna fade away. It's just another notch in your belt. That doesn't pay back. Playing lots of games typically don't pay back. Like going outside and having someone trust you to do something, and then you go back and you keep doing it, and then that person knows and trusts you. That's a bond beyond a game. The game does not, you are making the game, you're personifying the game. So like, you love a game so much that it is treating you back with things, but it's not doing any of that. The game literally doesn't do that. You want the game to make you feel a certain way that's outside your control, but it really isn't. It's a projection of yourself. When you're outside and you're interacting with like a boss, a teacher, or a friend, that stuff, it's undefined. It's so undefined. It's exciting. It's scary. Games is as scary and as challenging, as sad, as aggravating as you want it to be. It's a projection of you. And when someone says, I suck at this game, why can't I suck at this game? They're hating themselves. Because the game isn't literally telling you you suck. It's just telling you what it's designed. This is how much you performed. That's it. Your interpretation and your feelings of that is what is being reflected to you. And there isn't anyone that can counter that. There isn't someone there. There isn't an anti-game that says, don't worry, here's the statistics. Like, there are ways to like help with this, but it's not a developer's concern or a publisher's concern. Here's the statistics. Hey, have you noticed you've improved from day 2 to 3? And so the mindset stuff, when I'm talking about improving in OSU, that's what recording and journaling helps with. It helps with the self. Like, if you feel like you keep sucking, does your recording and your journal keeping say the same thing? If it does, then yeah, sure. Like, but it will give you a way to like address or tell you what doesn't work, so you gain more knowledge. But a lot of times games don't do that. People passively play games. It's like, grind, and then it's like, I don't understand. I've done this for 3 to 4 months and I'm out of ideas. It's like, well, did you even try ideas? Like, it's really blunt. It's a direct question, because if you didn't record it, you could have been doing the same thing for 3 to 4 months. Yes, you might be saying, but I made a conscious effort to remember what to do. It's like, but you have no recorded observations. There isn't, like, your parent isn't observing you. Your teacher isn't observing you. There isn't anyone who's there to witness it. So your evaluation of yourself has to be recorded in order to do that. And games, some games do that. Osu does, which is great. Osu, in my opinion, could do better at providing more metrics, but that's what Osu Laser is, right? Like, it's getting there. Peppy and co understands what motivates self-improvement. That's fantastic, but the vast majority of the games don't do that. Like, if you never beat a boss in FromSoft, like a FromSoft game, well, that's a blow to your self-esteem. Like, there's nothing like, oh, you got 1 strike in more this time. If you try to do this like another week, you'll get it. No, none of that. You're just like, yo, dude, you suck. Just give up. Or the person is telling themselves that. Like, it ain't worth it. That's your self-projection. That's how easily you give up. So with that said, in this game, I'm going to give up in the level of satisfaction I want. So I'm not going to be able to get 3 stars on everything. Not for the amount of time that I'm willing to invest. But it doesn't hurt my self-esteem. I just belong to a different generation of people. This does not define me. In a way, this is different from a kid. This is different from a kid who says, this video game doesn't make me feel anything, while they're yelling at you. That's a different story. That's when your mindset is not meeting how you're feeling. And it's really a common thing for younger people. They're still growing, but they don't have other stimuli to dissociate the cognitive dissonance or associate it. I'm like a 30-plus-year-old person who've gone through like the ringer. So it's not 80% video games. It's like fears, roller coasters, traveling, like public speaking, all that stuff normalize my things. But you have like a 13-year-old going around, it's like, you're a Fortnite target. It's like, oh, you can make money, but can you shoot heads? Like, what kind of metrics are kids measuring by for aptitude these days? They're defined by games. So, I don't know. I'm getting a little worried. I'm getting a little worried for the young ones. Because if I could feel dissatisfaction from this, like things like this, like designs like this, it can destroy a kid's self-esteem. Is it responsible for the parents? Sure, yeah, I agree. Like, we're talking about in isolation, but in the bigger picture, there are a lot of safeguards, right? The parents monitor the kid, but man, we're not going to try to focus on bad actors, but there are a lot of safeguards. I'm just saying that it's an interesting thought to think about how much kids are defined by their games now. And game developers, not that they need more on their plate and like have to satisfy unequivocal. I defend the developer and the publisher all the time about like meeting high standards and the unusual nature of life dependent like satisfaction on their products and stuff. Like, kids have high demand because it's their life, it's their lifestyle now. So they increase really unbelievable standards that developers and publishers have to balance like all that. But man, it's gonna be tough. I could definitely see how I'm the way because of the games I play. Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I just I like to think that there's going to be a balance somewhere. Like, accountability will be mixed with reward. Like, developers and publishers will get proper reward for adhering to certain designs. For me, I know all the different systems, at least enough systems of learning curves, like different learning curve structures. But for someone else, they don't really know what kind of learning curve they enjoy, the minimumness, they just feel it out. And feeling it out is very inconsistent. It's just, if you're constantly feeling it out, you're constantly feeling for the thing, the narrow range that feels comfortable. It's hard to appreciate things that make you uncomfortable because you're feeling it out. So you're just gonna feel the things you understand. So it really narrows the exposure. My mentality on video games is purely reflective of my lifestyle as a kid or growing up. So yeah, if you see a variety streamer who like does things like randomly, haphazardly, that person is more likely to be overall consistently satisfied with themselves than one that's honed and hyper focused. But now we're talking about like a smaller population. They don't represent the majority. Listlessness is on the decline for the younger audience. What I mean is they don't like explore or be confused or lost in the desert. There is dangers to that. There are dangers. Like when I turned 18, in the older generation, you have to determine what are you gonna do. You immediately get tossed to the desert, or you hope that your parents like directed you a path, and then suddenly you realize, well, now I don't have to follow my parents. Then you're stuck on the desert again. And yeah, there's pros and cons to that too. However, a kid that have decided themselves one path, nothing is going to stop you from thinking that's your only choice. You overwritten any outside influence. So, and it can be conditioned by video games too. It can be conditioned by the thing you spend most time. And then you start feeling like, if this fails, there's nothing else. Nothing can ever reach that. Like, can substitute for that or compete with it anymore. And you're more impressionable when you're younger. Like that's just, it's still classically true. It's still classically accepted as true. When you're more, you have less interference, less mental interference when you're a kid, because most things are novel. Things are still novel at that stage. If you grow up with video games and the video games are the things you choose, and then the algorithm that you use only give you what you want, by the time you become 20, it is going to be very, very difficult to help a young adult in their 20s explore new ways and other ways to extract reward and meaning from life. Like, it's going to be very tough. Because by the time you spend more than 10 years doing something, you're going to get to a dialogue where, with yourself, like the first realization of a young adult, I would say, is when you can appreciate this phrase. In my opinion, this would be a great phrase that young adults could ask yourself. Do you ever hate yourself for not liking something? If you can appreciate that, it gives you an avenue to start a path to appreciating things that you may not have, you won't ever be able to appreciate. So it lowers the threshold of how selective you are. So when someone says something like, I get frustrated by, I know this thing is really, really popular and everyone does this, and I want to try this thing, but I hate it when I hate this thing. Like, you just want to love something. Like, that's probably the hot take in this long digression. Have the capacity to know that you really want to like something, but you can't. If you can realize that, I feel like there's an opportunity there. But if you start thinking, there's no way I'll ever do this, I'm never going to do this, I don't like this, this can never happen, I can never find myself ever trying this, you're already locked in. And unfortunately, when you run out of solutions, right? If a kid approaches you and say, you spent 4 months doing something and I don't know, I can't ever improve anymore, you're locked in. There's nothing anyone can tell you. If you haven't reached a state where you're open to something that you absolutely dread or something that you haven't thought about, it's not going to change. You're just going to continue to bootstrap. And fingers crossed for an adult who's responsible for that kid, right? Is that they grind so hard that they manage to grind satisfaction out of it somehow. Which, that's, in my opinion, if I were to act as a psychiatrist or a psychologist, which I'm not, that's probably one of the biggest obstacles that they're going to face every day for a kid. Like, trying to get them to realize themselves, like, you think you've tried everything, but you've only tried one thing. Because your mind and your whole lifestyle has revolved around this one thing. And anything outside of that thing is considered not a possibility. So when you have a kid saying they spent 3 months, 3 months is kind of a long time. And in a sense, a very short amount of time. And they say they've tried everything and they didn't come up with new ideas. And they're asking for advice. That's not going to really change it. The mindset is you have to be open to advice and change first. What that kid is asking is for advice that falls within the realm. Son, no, son. You're probably a lot more open than some, like quite a lot. But no, like you know as well as I do. Being someone who excels in Osu, you can see it, right? Every time someone approaches you, it's the same behavioral pattern. It's the communication. Like, how do I improve on X, Y, and Z? But you're constantly wondering in the back of your head, did they really try everything? Because trying everything they know earnestly, it's very, very hard to believe you cannot find improvement if you tried everything that exists, not everything that person knows. And being open is the hardest thing. Even myself, like, I truly am really bad at asking for advice. But there's a difference. This is unfair because I'm a 30-year-old with a lot of experience or more experience, and you're asking a 14-year-old to be self-reliant, or like a 18 or like someone younger than 18 to be self-reliant. They didn't even have the opportunity to develop enough experiences to be self-reliant yet. But they are indirectly told that they are. If they can't self-improve at a young age, they're failures. Like, that is so cruel. And I almost think indirectly it can be video games that cause that mindset. Like, oh, everyone else is playing this game and they managed to complete the game and no hit from soft games and stuff. Why can't I do it? Like, well, you might not just... Maybe it's a different approach. Maybe you can't do it. But it's a small drop in the ocean. You can probably do something else that other person can't do. Like, there's a vast... But you can't... The game isn't going to tell you that. These things that you do every day, they're not going to tell you that. It isn't a parent or a teacher that goes and say, now, you have like 70 years of good health, right? Do not worry. There are far more exceedingly valuable things that I can't even tell you what they are. But if you're feeling down, be optimistic for the future, right? Like there are so many ways to feel good about yourself. Unfortunately, you can't really just go up to a kid and say that if they can't possibly envision a reality where it isn't the thing they're focused on that gives them value. Lucky kids, though, lucky kids, their interest and fun aligns with their aptitude, their early aptitude. That's like the ideal situation. However, for every one of those kids, there are like 99 kids that have a cognitive dissonance where they have wishful thinking and whatnot, and it's directed and towards something that will ultimately disappoint them, but turns out probably isn't what they're good at anyways. Like what I mean is you can't know if you only tried a few things, right? But it does feel good to land on the thing that you most. And this is, I mean, Sun thinks I'm talking about Sun probably thinks about our conversations and I'm talking about him sort of, but it's not. This is like like it includes you, but you're part of this generation. You're part of the Zoomer generation that grows up, so it can be relatable. And all the things I'm saying now, it's completely unrelatable to me. I cannot relate to it. I have no emotional like tether to it. I can't possibly feel, but I see it. I see the pattern. I can't like tell you how you should feel or something about it because I didn't grow up with this. So there's no way I can like communicate or design solutions that will help compromise that, like help deal with that or something, because it's a perspective I can't reach. There's no attachment to this. Like it's crazy. I don't envy kids that have to grow up and escape where the product they're using to get value, it doesn't help you back. It doesn't tell you sometimes it's okay to have a bad day. Sometimes it's okay to have a good day. I mean, sometimes it's great to celebrate your good days. Sometimes you just gotta treat yourself to an ice cream or something when you have a bad day. And that happens so much with performance-based games. And the performance-based games are the most notoriously viral. So when you're spectating and stuff, you're expectating people who are doing extraordinary things. They're not the rule. They're the exception. And every single time, it's like, oh yeah, no, some days I just feel so crummy. It's like, and my first question, I tend to ask this first. Do you feel that it's normal? Like, if you don't feel like it's normal, then, you know, I have to get into the mindset like, okay, so we have to develop this understanding that how do we alleviate or promote a solution that is in that mindset? To me, it's perfectly normal. Like some days, it can get as worse as, like, for a human being, sleeping in an hour longer just because you want to is like really on the bottom. But to think that you perform at 80% or even 70% of your height or where your proficiency is, that's like getting a job. Like, man, if you're in a job and you always work above 70% of your, at least 70% of the output, that standard is so high. Like you're playing a game with a standard that's so incredibly high for a human being. Like when you're low, you can get really low on things. But when it comes to video games, people hold them up to a really high standard. And it's self-imposed. Like, the game isn't telling you you're less of a human being. some games might do it as a joke, but you know, you're not an incompetent person. When it takes a very, very competent person to play any video game, or even appreciate the bigger picture of anything. So, nowadays, they keep getting younger. Kids come up and say like, "I just feel so incompetent." Like, you're an idiot. I'm an idiot. And then it makes it also easier for them to project that. So like, "Hey, you're garbage," but how much of that is feeling insecure about being being garbage themselves? And I'm saying that as lightly as I can because I don't think either party is garbage. As an adult, I see just two kids, one kid projecting their frustrations and another kid responding and triggering the same insecurities that will allow that kid to call someone else garbage. And it just keeps cycling. There's no referee here. There's no like an adult or like someone outside the system to say, hey guys, you both play this video game. Clearly it takes an intelligent person to play these video games. Like, there's no normalization of any of this. It's just, I have a high standard. I'm going to compare everyone to this increasingly high standard. And then when I get frustrated with my high standard, I'm going to project my frustrations and find either people who are lower than my standard and call them garbage so I can feel better about all this could just be subconscious. I know what that's saying is like victim blaming and whatnot, but all this requires some awareness, and it can really benefit someone from just saying, "Hey, you're not garbage." And then when you feel like you're not garbage and incompetent, you go to other people and you express that too. Like, I'm pretty bad at this game. I'm gonna be honest. Like, rhythm games are not my forte, but I know what I can and cannot do at the moment. So when I go to someone else, I see them struggling, practicing, and also playing and getting either better results or less better results. I can accurately share that without unrealistically projecting my own feelings. Like when Coffers plays this, he practically just flushes and turn on turbo mode and like turbo everything. It's like, well, but I don't feel like garbage because of it, because there's way more things outside this. But if a person plays this game and like another person just drops in and like wrecks it, you're gonna feel some sort of incompetence. It does happen with puzzle games sometimes. I kind of get a little prideful about puzzle games though. Anyways, long digression, but you could be watching the Super Bowl right now. I'm just kidding. Son's like, what? You guys could. I think the Super Bowl kickoff is soon. I'm pretty sure it's today. If you're really, really down, pull out a piece of paper and write the things you can do or what you have done. I personally, that's very therapeutic. If you're okay, then that's fine. Because there is moderation too, right? If you get too conceited and self-deluded, that's the opposite. But if you're really down and feeling sad about your accomplishments, really ask yourself, write down the stuff you can do. You'd be surprised how many people have trouble walking right now. So it's nice to get a little bit of balance when you're constantly being fed negative stimuli. There are plenty of positive stimuli available to you within yourself to make yourself feel a little bit better. Oops. This game is not making me feel great about my competence in the moment. I'll check your windows in a sec. Oh, first. Sorry, I just remembered. My bad. I'm not saying it out of softness, by the way. Being good at something is hard. It's really, really hard. I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It requires such a sacrifice. It requires a sacrifice of your mental health. But if you don't have the mental health to do it in the first place, it's a recipe for disaster. So take care of yourself first. Like, engage that you have the ability to engage in something like that. I'm not that kind of guy that's gonna tell you that it's easy. But I can definitely tell you when you don't have enough. At least if you ever want, if someone like comes to confide in me or like something, I am not a stranger to tell you that you do not have the foundations yet. But I won't write you off as like it's inevitable and you can't. My first and biggest priority is that humans are dynamic. They are way more robust if they choose to be. Oops. I refuse to believe it. I mean, it's one of a stubborn principle, but I refuse to believe that people are incompetent, like permanently incompetent. At least if you're able to talk to me and find me in some way, you are far more competent than even individuals who don't know that they need help.